Good Thursday evening to you. For Telesur, I'm Regan Devines in Caracas, Venezuela. We begin with this evening's headlines. Accused of unauthorized spending, Brazil President Dilma Rousseff is in the spotlight, facing a possible impeachment. A new document discloses the truth behind a 1976 assassination in Chile by order of former dictator Augusto Pinochet. And Russia continues its airstrikes in Syria, but who are they really bombing? The details on these stories and more now on From the South. Thank you so much for being here with us. The Brazilian government has dismissed the idea that Wednesday's rejection of its accounts by a federal audit court could lead to the impeachment of President Dilma Rousseff. The ruling that the government's accounting practices back in 2014 were illegal came as a new setback for President Rousseff, whose popularity is the lowest for a Brazilian president in more than 20 years. According to the court, her government's practices included taking unauthorized loans from state-owned banks to make up for budget shortfalls. The court's ruling will now go to Congress.
Nations fail when institutions fail to fulfill their functions. We fulfill our mission in a technical and transparent manner in search of a better future for the country.
The country's conservative opposition has seized on the decision of the audit court to try to widen support for an impeachment for President Rousseff. Our correspondent in Brazil takes a look at the political opposition's struggle for power.
Brazil's conservative opposition has now made 5 requests to impeach President Dilma Rousseff.
None of these requests has any legal basis. In fact, they are trying to manipulate aspects of the constitution to bring down a president who was elected whether or not you like her government. What's happening in the Congress is a coup d'etat, which will be defeated because he has no legal support and it's immoral.
Faced with the threat of a parliamentary coup, Rousseff reshaped her cabinet, giving more space to the PMDB. This extortion by the government's so-called allies means the centre-right PMDB increased its number of ministers from 6 to 7, while Rousseff's Workers' Party lost 3. However, the Speaker of the lower house and leading opponent of the government, Eduardo Cunha, is himself from the PMDB and has just been accused of corruption in Switzerland.
The PMDB is the biggest party in Congress, and this is reflected in the number of ministries it negotiated. They should strengthen the government's support in the Congress and in short term help to calm the political situation.
Facing possible imprisonment, Cunha leads the Congress that has been questioning the Dilma government's accounts.
The President of the House of Deputies presents himself as a pillar of virtue and respectability and tries to manipulate public opinion. But in fact, he's under investigation for corruption. So bit by bit, the enemies are being unmasked.
It's a major paradox, but these are the people seeking to bring down the government and overturn the choice of millions of Brazilians in last year's presidential election.
The Chilean dictator Augusto Pinochet did order the assassination of a Chilean diplomat in Washington back in 1976. That's according to newly declassified intelligence. Orlando Letelier was killed by a car-bomb in 1976. He was the foreign minister under the Allende government and fled to the US after being imprisoned and tortured. According to the document given to President Bachelet by the US Secretary of State John Kerry, Pinochet almost killed his own head of intelligence to cover his tracks. Letelier's son, Senator Juan Pablo Letelier, also discovered a memo from the then Secretary of State George Shultz to President Ronald Reagan revealing their knowledge of the attack.
We are very hopeful that we will manage to uncover the truth with this new declassification. And I think that for the first time, we have certain turning points and information which we did not have before. We think this will open a new phase in what Chileans have always needed, which is the truth regarding what happened in our country, with respect to the responsibility of particular people. some of which are dead, like in the case of General Pinochet, but also the responsibility of others which are alive and kicking and can collaborate with these documents in order to help us come closer to the truth.
The main suspect in the death of Argentine prosecutor Alberto Nisman traveled to the U.S. soon after the murder, where he is believed to be seeking refuge. The Argentine authorities sent a blue notice to Interpol last month, seeking details on the whereabouts of former head of intelligence Antonio Jaime Stiuso, who reportedly fled from Porto Alegre in Brazil to Miami on February 19th, using an Italian passport. Argentina's government had openly speculated that Stiuso was working for the U.S. and criticized Obama's administration for not answering repeated inquiries about his whereabouts. The Colombian government has requested to meet again with the lawyers of the FARC rebel group to finalize agreements on justice. Reports say that the government wants to fully finalize the agreement on extradition, kidnapping, and the selection of judges. However, the FARC have said that the agreement on justice is closed.
The story of the creation of peace is written by fulfilling commitments. The Commission of Legal Advisors fulfilled their word. We fulfilled our word. We are still waiting for what was signed to be accepted without hesitation. What may be missing is development that cannot change the substance and the scope of the conceived system.
The official death toll in the Guatemala landslide has risen to 220, with another 350 still missing. The mudslide covered Santa Catalina Pinula on the outskirts of Guatemala City last week, burying over 100 homes under rock, earth and trees, also burying entire families alive. Prosecutors in Guatemala said that they are looking at whether there was any criminal misconduct at the site after they had warned of the risks of building homes in the neighborhood, which lies at the bottom of a deep ravine. Moving to Mexico, that's where the UN's human rights chief called on Mexico to set a timetable for the withdrawal of military forces from police work. Zaid Rad al-Hussein said that the ministers of defense and the Navy told him that they themselves were not at ease with having their forces doing police chores. Drug-related violence surged in Mexico after former President Felipe Calderón deployed troops in late 2006 to crack down on organized crime. Human rights organizations accused soldiers of committing abuses while deployed on the streets of Mexico.
The sooner we can better ensure that the police and the Attorney General's office is able to provide the sort of legal protection that the people of Mexico deserve and are entitled to, the quicker then you can have a return to barracks.
And joining us on the show tonight right now is Colin Doherty, an analyst based in Rio de Janeiro, to deal with the possible impeachment of Brazilian President Michelle Bachelet. Hi, Colin. Thanks for taking the time to chat with us. Firstly, can you tell us what happened in the audit court and what it means?
Well, so right now there was a decision today made by the court that Congress is allowed to have a special committee to oversee whether Duma broke the law or whether or not some of the facts behind the accounting make her liable for impeachment.
Now, what do you think is the likelihood that President Rousseff will be impeached? How do you think that would happen? And what would it mean for Brazil?
Well, this is a step in this process, but it would still be a very long process. I think there's about 6 or 7 steps that would have to take place, and a couple of those involve 2/3 majority votes in Congress and in the Senate, and so there's many things to go ahead here. So the likeliness of this happening is pretty low at this stage, but it's still, discussed every day in the media here.
Final question before I have to go. What do you think is the role of Lower House Speaker Eduardo Cunha in this push? I mean, isn't he also deeply embroiled in corruption and bribery scandals?
Well, Cunha's a slippery guy. I just saw him on today on the TV, giving the no comment. Of course, this isn't a scandal thing, but he did get caught today with a bunch of Swiss bank accounts in some family members' names, and there's no doubt that he's in deep as well, as they all are, and the fact that they're separate parties makes the whole sort of strange bedfellows thing going. So yeah, but there's no doubt that pretty much everyone in the senior ranks of these political parties is in some way involved in some sort of corruption. So we'll see how it plays out.
Definitely we'll see. We'll be following these events in Brazil as they unfold. Thanks so much, Colin. We'll touch base another time.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Moving on now, organizations of domestic workers in Paraguay rallied on Wednesday to demand the formal proclamation of the law of domestic work and equal remuneration. The law would require that employers pay domestic workers 60% of the minimum wage, a measure questioned by several Congress people who claim that the middle class could not afford it. The domestic workers, who represent 7.2% of the country's labor force, say they will continue their fight until they get the minimum wage and access to social security and retirement. Domestic workers from Argentina, Uruguay and Brazil sent messengers of support to the marchers.
We believe that without a minimum wage, our retirement will be very low. Many of our mates who have lost their jobs because they can no longer work don't have a retirement pension, and they are not registered at the Social Security Institute either, which means their health. That is our struggle.
Bolivia's government has launched a new social program called Prenatal Subsidy for Life. It's for pregnant women without insurance. The plan will provide some 2,000 women with a package of special products for 4 months, starting their 5th month of pregnancy and after passing prenatal controls. President Evo Morales said that Bolivia is using its economic stability in order to grant its citizens well-being. And coming up after the break, the outrage continues as 33 people are still missing 5 days after a catastrophic U.S. airstrike on a hospital in the Afghan city of Kunduz, including 24 staff members. This story and more coming up next.
The truth behind the power. We lift the lid on some of the world's most ruthless figures. Open file. Only on telesurtv.net in English. Wherever the news, you'll be there. An insight into Africa today. With Bill Fletcher. The Global African. Only on telesurtv.net in English. Wherever the news, you'll be there. We need to understand the world we live in. We require news with critical points of view, thorough analysis and social commitment. This information is vital to think, to understand and to change. The world demands a new perspective. telesurtv.net/English. Wherever the news, you'll be there.
Welcome back. There are more videos released by Russia's defense ministry, and they claim to show the destruction of 27 terrorist targets. The defense ministry specified that 8 targets hit were Islamic State strongholds, as well as 11 training camps affiliated with the group. Earlier this week, the US government accused Russia of targeting other groups that were opposed to Syria's President Bashar al-Assad. US officials also referred to the Russian offensive as flawed. For more, we have a report from Hazem Abdullah.
The General Staff of the Syrian Army announced in the statement on Thursday the beginning of a large-scale offensive aimed to liberate areas and towns fell under the terrorists. General Ali Abdullah Ayoub, the Chief of General Staff of Syrian Army, confirmed that the offensive comes after the Russian airstrike damaged the facilities of the terrorists.
The Russian airstrikes against the Islamic State in Iraq and Syria and other terrorist organizations have reduced the combat capabilities of the terrorists. The Syrian armed forces have taken the reins of military operations and formed well-armed and equipped human forces, mainly the 4th Corps storming.
Syrian military source confirmed that the Russian Air Force, in cooperation with the Syrian Air Forces, conducted a series of precise airstrikes on several ISIS targets in the province of Aleppo and Homs. 27 Jabhat al-Nusra targets were destroyed in the Latakia province by the Russian-Syrian airstrikes.
The Syrian-Russian cooperation that we see today is a natural product of what is happening on the ground. We need a special anti-terror operation for a ground offense and a stronger party to deploy. It is inevitably the Syrian Arab Army, even if the US and its allies do not like it.
The Syrian-Russian joint operation constitutes a clear success on the ground in terms of implementation and speed in recovering the sites from the hands of the terrorists. The Syrians are optimistic today more than ever and expect that it will end their sorrow. Hazem Abdullah, Telesur, Syria.
Shinzo Abe, Japan's Prime Minister, he's promised to contribute some $810 million to assist refugees from Iraq and Syria. He will also dedicate resources to the maintenance of peace and stability in the region. Abe made this announcement in the midst of bilateral meetings with Turkey's President Tayyip Erdogan. The Japanese Prime Minister also acknowledged Turkey as the country that has taken in the majority of the average 4 million people who had been made refugees because of the Syrian war, which began in 2011. 33 people are still missing after a U.S. airstrike on a Doctors Without Borders hospital in the Afghan city of Kunduz. 24 of those missing are staff members. The strike on Saturday killed 12 staff members and 10 patients, and has resulted in the closing of the center, devastating the local community, which depends on the hospital in a region that lacks medical care. And those who were wounded in the airstrike have been taken to Kabul for treatment. The death toll stands at 22, but is expected to rise. Doctors Without Borders is reviewing its operations in Afghanistan and demanded an international investigation into the bombing. They fiercely criticized the inconsistent accounts of the incident by Afghan and U.S. authorities, who took days to accept responsibility.
We're going to try and push as hard as we can to get at least one of the states to come forward. I think it would show a distinct lack of courage if none of the 76 were to come forward.
The head of NATO, Jens Stoltenberg, has also called for a full and transparent investigation into the bombing.
We addressed the situation in Kunduz, including the tragic loss of lives in the Doctors Without Borders hospital. We underlined the importance of a full and thorough and transparent investigation. We need to have all the facts on the table.
And the commander of U.S. forces in Afghanistan again took responsibility and also promised a congressional panel and full investigation.
On Saturday morning, our forces provided close air support to Afghan forces at their request. But to be clear, the decision to provide aerial fires was a U.S. decision made within the U.S. chain of command. A hospital was mistakenly struck, and we would never intentionally target a protected medical facility. I must allow the investigation to take its course, and therefore I'm not at liberty to discuss further specifics at this time. However, I assure you that the investigation will be thorough, objective, and transparent, and I will get those results back to this committee.
Svetlana Alexievich has been named the winner of this year's Nobel Prize for Literature. The Belarusian author won for her portrayal of life in the former Soviet Union. According to the Swedish Academy, her body of work was, quote, a monument to suffering and courage in our time, end quote. Alexievich collected hundreds of interviews from persons who were impacted by the Second World War and the Chernobyl nuclear disaster.
What do I think? I think we know who will win. The winner is known because the people got scared of war, got scared of what happened in Ukraine and now in Syria. You understand that war is frightening. Our people, I think, do not want to take up arms till the end. And I am happy because I'm also not a supporter of revolutions, but I think that the path is long still. We will not be free soon, unfortunately.
And in Palestine, heavy rains are hampering the reconstruction effort, worrying the thousands displaced. Noah Harazin filed this report.
An early heavy rainfall flooded the low-lying areas throughout the Gaza Strip on Tuesday, forcing schools in the southeast to close doors and suspend classes. According to the Gaza municipality, the level of water ranged from 10 to 15 centimeters in some areas, causing minor damage in some main properties. However, agriculture experts expected a heavy rainy season in the coastal enclave this year. For the second year in a row, the showers shall worsen the situation for more than 100,000 displaced Palestinians whose homes were completely or partly damaged during Israel's last summer's offensive against the Gaza Strip. The rainstorm raised fears among the displaced families who find now here but caravans to take shelter and hide from an unwanted visitor who will renew their sufferings and impact their lives in the light of the late reconstruction operation that has not started yet.
Look at my shelter. I have been living here for almost a year after my home was severely damaged during the Israeli troops' ground invasion in 2014. Today it rained and it's just the beginning of a very cold winter. God knows how me and my family and children will suffer during this season. I have nothing but to pray. I'm tired of calling upon leaders and nations.
As a result of low temperatures in winter and an increase in power consumption, a new all-power crisis is on the verge of explosion in Gaza, and citizens are expecting to receive less than 6 hours of electricity per day due to the Israeli blockade, closed crossings, and the ongoing fuel shortage. Noor Harazin, Telesu TV, Gaza.
And now a brief look at other stories making news around the world.
The German car company Volkswagen has admitted fault and have taken responsibility for breaking the rules on US diesel emissions tests. President and CEO Michael Horn added that the company is willing to face any consequence deemed appropriate. The company has already begun an investigation into when and how it all happened.
On behalf of our company, my colleagues in Germany, and me personally, I would like to offer a sincere apology for Volkswagen's use of software programs that serve to defeat the regular emissions testing regime.
2 ministers in Kosovo's parliament are reported to have fainted after opposition members released tear gas into the chamber. The ruling government described the action as having exceeded all bounds of institutional democratic behaviour. The tear gassing was in protest of the deal broker between Kosovo and Serbia to normalise relations, which they argue could deepen the country's ethnic divide. Just 3 weeks before elections, the Turkish government has banned broadcasting channels that are allied to US-based cleric Fethullah Gulen, who is an enemy to President Tayyip Erdogan. Erdogan has accused Gulen of seeking to topple his government. Critics say this is a clear violation of the freedom of the press. And severe weather patterns in Eastern Africa are being blamed on the El Niño phenomenon. Experts are anticipating a major El Niño effect this year, with some areas already have experienced heavy flooding and harsh droughts. Concerns centre about livelihoods and crops during this time.
The saga continues for famous soccer player Lionel Messi and his father Jorge, as they've both been ordered to appear in court. The public prosecutor has recommended an 18-month jail sentence and over $2 million in fines for the alleged defrauding of tax authorities of more than $4 million. The prosecutors argued that the footballer should not have to make a court appearance. The judges ruled otherwise. The hearings will take place at a court located near to Barcelona. FIFA President Sepp Blatter and European soccer chief Michel Platini have been provisionally suspended for 90 days from all football activities on a national and international level. FIFA Ethics Committee made the announcement earlier this Thursday in Switzerland, where they also said that FIFA presidential candidate Chung Moong-joon of South Korea has been banned for 6 years and fined for over $100,000. In addition, the organization's Secretary General Jérôme Valk has been banned for 90 days. FIFA's interim president will be Issa Hayatou, who is the head of African soccer. with the recent revelations of the suspensions of the FIFA president and other high-ranking members of soccer's governing body. FIFPro, which is an organization that represents professional soccer players worldwide, say they have lost confidence in FIFA's ability to reform themselves.
Yes, we're very disappointed to see more and more high-ranking officials dragged through the mud, because this again is another indication of football which has not taken care of itself, and it's lurching from one crisis to another. FIFPro no longer has any real confidence in FIFA being able to reform itself responsibly or act in the best interest of the game, no matter how hard it tries. We believe they've tried and failed in the past. Therefore, it might be time to look at ways to implement new models, new ways of governing the game. That includes, for example, the players. The players can no longer be left on the sideline, nor can the clubs. Key stakeholders must have real decision-making powers and real veto rights to administer the issues that affect.
Indian artist Sudhakar Yadav has built a gigantic car and hopes to break the Guinness record for the world's largest art car. After designing cars shaped like a hamburger, tennis ball, shoe, and even a toilet, the quirky artist decided to go big. So he modeled the car on a 1922 Ford Touareg, which is currently on display at Yadav's museum in the southern city of Hyderabad. Thought everyone got me there. And that's it from us this evening. Remember, there is more on these and other stories on our website, telesurtv.net/English, from our news teams in Quito, Ecuador, and right here in Caracas, Venezuela. My name is Regan Veens. We hope you can join us tomorrow on From the South. Until then, have a great evening.